right now. So do you want to go through the usual intro and then Simon starts?
Yes, sir. You guys ready?
Ready, set.
Welcome, everybody, to the Secret Hideout podcast. I'm Josh Roman. My buddy here to my right is Simon Yu. And right below me, the man with the sexiest stash in the world, Jordan Acosta.
Ooh,
Welcome,
yes.
guys. How was your week so far?
It's been good. It's been good.
Wow,
It's been
yeah,
good.
very great enthusiasm, Simon. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, because I'm saving my enthusiasm for later for this
You could
episode.
start it off because that's how you get the people going, Simon. You bring the excitement right off the bat. You let people know that you had a great week because you know what? So much information was given to us.
So much.
So much.
Woo!
Things that just happened, and I can't wait to get into it. It's going to be DC heavy. Before we get into DC, Simon,
Mainly.
share some stuff with us that was just revealed by Star Wars.
Okay, I'll be brief because yes, it is DCU heavy because huge news about that. But Star Wars Visions, Disney Plus, Disney announced that there's going to be a second season of Visions, and I'm excited about that because I loved the first season, and all of us have our own favorite episodes or favorite anthology. It's an anthology, so those that don't know, you should know better and watch it. But if you don't, it's an anthology in the Star Wars universe. So you won't see, you might not see like some old characters that you're familiar with, like the Skywalkers or Darth Vader or what, but you'll see other characters of different characters within the universe. Anyways, it was mainly Japanese anime the first season. What's exciting about this coming season is they expanded to other animated studios from other countries. So the only Japanese studio that I know of from this 9 list right here is the one on the far right in the middle, the Art Shitaijio. That's the only Japanese studio. Everyone else either is in Europe or Korea, actually. So Mir Studios is a Korean animated studio. I did not know that until I researched it. They're actually known for helping out with um, Voltron, the Netflix series. So that's one of their contributions. 88 Pictures is an Indian animation studio. They did a show called Troll Hunter on Netflix. That's how they're known. Studio La Cachette. This is the one that I didn't know, and this is pretty brilliant. They helped create Primal, Jenny Tartakovsky's Primal, and then the big one here is Aardman because, well, I say it's big because it's like I know it probably the most of all of them. And Aardman Animation Studios is the stop motion one with Wallace and Gromit. Cartoon Saloon is a European based studio, and they did The Secret of the Kells, Wolf Walker, all that. Basically, bottom line, these are amazing animation studios, and I am thrilled that they have partnered with Disney to do Visions 2, and I can't wait. And I mean, I don't know what to expect, but I'm confident that it's going to be just as exciting. So, can't wait for Visions 2.
Yeah, I think I didn't know any of these studios, not familiar with any studios, but when you said the Gromis and what?
Wallace and Gromit, stop
Wallace
motion.
and Gromit, the stop motion. I'm really excited to see if they're gonna actually do something like that. That'd be great. The last season was fantastic. There was an episode I didn't like. So yeah, I'm really excited for it too.
Yeah. I'm actually a little disappointed we won't get to see a continuation of some of what they did last season, particularly The Ninth Jedi, which felt like a pilot for a series, and I would still like to see that series. But yeah, Aardman, pretty big deal. Cartoon Saloon is also those are the only two I'd ever really heard of before. Yeah, this is surprising and unexpected. I really kind of thought Visions was like the anime Star Wars. I thought that was like kind of the whole deal. So this was a huge, out of left field change. I think what I'm wondering is, like, especially looking at like Aardman, because stop motion animation is, it's not easy. It takes like tremendous amounts of time. And so I'm wondering like what they can even pull off within those constraints. Aside from that, though, I mean, what we saw last season, I mean, it was all great. And so I expect this season to be no different. Yeah, which of these, Simon, are you most excited for, honestly, of these studios?
Honestly, Cartoon Saloon is the one that I'm most excited about, because I love those movies. There's another one, and I'm embarrassed because
which movies, by the way, are we talking about with Cartoon Saloon?
Yeah, Cartoon Saloon. This is Secret of the Kells, Wolfwalker. There's also there's a movie that I'm blanking on the title, but it's about a little girl who lives in a lighthouse with her father, and like she befriends shelties, which are like sea mermaid creatures.
Oh, yeah.
And but yeah, that's that studio. And so I love the animation. I love the feel of that animation studio. The stories are really warm and fuzzy feelings that you get after. But Secret of the Kells is one of my favorite animated movies. The least I'm kind of be impressed about is Triggerfish. Triggerfish is a South African and Irish animation studio, but a lot of them, they're like in development. I'm not a big fan of their animation per se, and a lot of it is very animal moral lessons kind of stories and stuff, but the animation is not particularly my cup of tea. Mir Studios is phenomenal. I mean, like I said, they helped with Voltron, and I love that animation. They also helped with Korra, that the next iteration of the Last Airbender and stuff. So they have that kind of particular kind of mix between animation, Western and Japanese animation. Their big show right now, I don't know too much about it, but it's called Lookism on Netflix, and apparently it's being super popular right now. So, anyways, Cartoon Saloon is my first one. I wanted to talk about, since you brought it up, Jordan, about Aardman, and I can go on about this forever, so I'll stop with this. But I wonder if they asked Aardman right after Visions 1. So that they just, because you're right, stop motion is a long, arduous process of just moving a millimeter here, click, moving a millimeter here, click, So I'm wondering, maybe, anyways.
You think all this stuff is probably in production, or at least pre-production already?
Sure.
Like, they wouldn't have announced this if they didn't know already that
yeah.
Yeah.
I hope to the Almighty from above that it is stop motion. I don't want them to concede and do computer graphics and stuff, or like computer animation.
And do you want it to be their usual comedic style?
Yes, I do. I totally do. I think it'd be hilarious. I think it would be, especially like if it was a droid show. Like, okay, so there was an episode of Wallace and Gromit where they go to the moon, and there's the moon protector, because the reason why they want to go to the moon is because that's the center of cheese. Yeah, it's made out of cheese and stuff like that, right? I mean, I could just totally see them do a droid episode, like, flat. Yeah, it'd be awesome. But anyways, this is exciting to me, and I cannot wait for this.
Yeah, I think we're all excited. This is something that like last year was their best, the best stuff that came out.
Right?
Besides Mandalorian, it was really good stuff. Other big news, man. James Gunn finally broke the news and gave his timeline. Jordan, you want to walk us through that?
Yeah. I mean, let's ease into this a bit. So just to note, we're going to spend the rest of the show just talking about DC, because there's a lot.
Yeah. There was a leak about Quantum Mania, but yeah, we'll just talk about DC.
Well, I mean, it's hard to get excited about any of the MCU stuff right now.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Right.
So I think there's a couple things, though, before we get into it, just to mention, right? Is that one, James Gunn just recorded a video and said all this stuff, and then put it on Twitter, and then started responding to people in comments on Twitter, and has continued to say things. I was actually wondering, like, hey, should we record something the next day? Because I feel like that's what you do, right? If you want to have a podcast, you gotta strike while the iron's hot. But I'm actually kind of glad we waited, because it feels like every day there's like a little more tidbits, like little pieces. And so, and it also takes some time to like absorb some of it, because it was a lot. And I'm like, oh dude, he's referencing comics I hadn't read in like 10 years. Right. Like,
I think just a point to that, Jordan. It's like, I think we got accustomed to these giant theatrics and spectacles that Marvel would do when they made big announcements like this. And then to see James Gunn just behind a camera, it looked like he probably did in his garage or something. He just put a screen up in the back.
It wasn't slick at all. You could tell they cut at parts. They were just like splicing stuff together.
Yeah. So, but like, I think he let the product and he let the goals speak for themselves. It wasn't like all these oohs and ahs and lights and cameras. It was just like, this is the goals we're gonna do, and we're like, oh, I love it. And I think he got a huge reception from it. But yeah, sorry, go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. It's not something we typically see the high level executives do at these companies. Certainly, Kevin Feige, I think we discussed, he's a robot in a warehouse at the back of the Disney lot in Burbank somewhere, right? Like he doesn't come out and just tell people things. They're very careful about what they share and when they share it. And in this case, it feels like James Gunn is like, no, this is what I want to do. A lot of it sounds kind of crazy. He even had a follow-up post saying, here's the comics we're basing stuff on. Like he's, we'll talk a bit more about some of the writers, because usually you'll announce these like, new superhero movies get announced, and maybe there's some talk about what comics influenced it. In this case, he's just straight up hiring some comic book writers in some cases, or consulting with them directly, which is a unique change, right? So immediately, separating themselves from Marvel, like distinguishing, the DCU is going to be very different.
Absolutely. But you know what? If I may, like I was thinking about what we were saying about how DC's introducing it totally different to how MCU has done it for a while. But do you guys remember WonderCon, San Francisco, Moscone Center? The very first ever MCU movie that was ever introduced was Iron Man. Well, it was the first movie, right? But it was Iron Man, but they didn't have the pomp. They just showed it in a panel at WonderCon Moscone Center, and it was basically, I'm reminded of that, of what James Gunn did. Like Jon Favreau just shows up and he says, hey, this is like, there's a very similar energy that Favreau has with Gunn, where it's just like, hey, we haven't finished it yet, but we wanted to do something that I think you guys would love. Would you like to see this? Would you like to see that? And that's what it felt like. And I was excited about that. I was just like, wow, this is cool. This is amazing. Like finally the DC prod IP will be done with respect and done well, and it reminded me of back in the day WonderCon at Moscone Center, bro. And so just like,
so that's interesting. Yeah, like Favreau made a Jon Favreau movie, right? Very typical, the kind of stuff he's done before, and then immediately ran into issues with the studio, and particularly enemy of the show. What's his name? You know who I'm talking about, right?
The old roadie.
Ike Perlmutter.
Yeah, Ike Perlmutter.
who just seems to hate joy and tries to ruin everything. Because people don't want to see like, it was his idea to like recast Rhodey. It's no one's gonna notice because he thinks all people look the same. I guess.
Yeah. Gosh.
And sorry, I love this picture, and I hope they don't sue us for this. But Ike Perlmutter, famously friend of Donald Trump, seen here making Donald Trump look respectable by comparison. I mean, how do you even sitting there indoors with sunglasses on? So just apparently a very unpleasant guy because, and he's still on the board, and apparently he's good friends with that activist investor who's now trying to like take over Disney right now. Now that Bob Iger's back, I don't know if you heard about that, but he's trying to buy out shares and interfere with what Iger is trying to do to like kind of restore Disney to its former glory before he had stepped down a few years ago. So anyway, but yeah, the business angle is interesting because yeah, you're right. It does feel a bit more creatively driven, the way that the MCU seemed at first, and then before things kind of got messy. So yeah, with that, why don't we just jump into it? And we will break this down one step at a time because there's a lot of stuff. I spent some time this weekend trying to sort of like make sense of it all in my head. It was just there's so many things going on, and I came up with this beautiful work with
Charlie Day billboard. Yeah, Charlie
yes,
Day
this is my Pepe Silva moment. Because I
guide us, sir.
Yes. So
what do we have here?
What I've done here is I took screenshots of all the stuff from the video announcement, lined them up, and then arranged some of the comics that they mentioned, as well as some of what looks like the most influential creators on what's been announced so far. There's a lot of things we still don't know anything about. We could make guesses about what inspiration they might be taking for Wonder Woman. It's kind of hard to say though, right? But based on what they did say, there's some stuff we can know. Before we dive into it point by point, I kind of wanted to think about the big picture here, right? Because like after the initial announcement, especially looking at this, there's a bunch of stuff that occurs to me that's really weird about this announcement, potentially risky about the direction he wants to go. And the one that really stands out to me is that it's super scattershot, right? Like there's a lot of like, yeah, Superman, Batman, not surprising, but it looks like he's leaning in hard to like the Authority, which literally nobody has ever heard of outside of like a couple dozen people who hang out in your local comic book shop. Booster Gold, who's a fan favorite of comics readers, but I'm pretty sure nobody outside of comics readers knows who that is.
Yep.
What do you guys think about that? Do you think that, just looking at the whole thing together, that this makes sense? That this is the direction and that this is going to turn DC around?
I don't. So, okay, let's backtrack just a little bit.
Tell us what you really think, Josh.
Just a little bit. So, we have to remember this is the first half of chapter 1. Right? So, we don't know what's in the latter of this chapter.
Yeah, this is some of Gods and Monsters, I believe is what
right.
Said, right?
So, we have 6 shows and 6 movies. I think out of the movies, we have 2 well-known properties in Batman and Superman. I would say Supergirl is like a half, like a 0.5. And then in the shows, we have maybe 2 known characters, like in Lanterns, and I would say Paradise Lost for just the mythology of, the island of Lesbos.
Mm-hmm.
But everything, huh?
Yeah, I think
Themyscira. Yeah, Themyscira.
Lesbos, yeah, the island of Lesbos is like an actual island. I think.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I know.
Okay, that was a joke. Yeah.
Was it? Oh.
Well, that is where the word lesbian comes from.
That's true.
Yes,
that's true.
Yes.
So it was a historical reference joke. I like that. Okay, all right.
I like how he just assumed like he doesn't know what he's talking
about. Give me more
tried
credit.
to make a joke, and we really
No. That was good. That was good.
So, I think overall, it doesn't look like a fantastic lineup. Just by like, if I ask my wife to come check this lineup up, she'll be like, "Okay, what's so exciting about this?" There's like maybe 4 properties she's like excited about. The rest,
she's familiar with.
Right?
Is that okay? Here's the question. Here's my thoughts on this. Is that necessarily a problem? Right?
No, I don't think it's a problem, but I think I don't think it's a problem for James Gunn. For the properties he's been able to take and flip and make them very popular, very well known, and likable,
right?
For the masses, I don't think it's a problem for him.
So Guardians, like
And
so
I
far,
think
his track record is Guardians of the Galaxy 3 movies, which have all been huge, and many
right,
considered to maybe be the best thing to come out of the MCU.
right.
As well as the Suicide Squad for DC,
Suicide
which
Squad.
I don't know if it was a huge hit, but it probably did pretty good streaming numbers, and a lot of people seem to like it. And then Peacemaker,
Right.
which I think HBO Max said was like their biggest premiere or got the most streams or something. However they measure
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah.
So HBO was HBO. The Suicide Squad the movie was critically acclaimed. Like everyone loved it. It got high reviews. Box office wise, because of COVID, didn't get the numbers I was looking for. But as far as like recognition
Right.
and people liking it, it was one of the top Rotten Tomato movies for WB that year. I think it was because WB had other movies that were just really bad. Besides Dune, I think Dune was another one that was really good. Um, and I think if we want, I could probably tap in and wrangle Waller in that, knowing now that it's going to be like a hybrid of Peacemaker. You know,
Well, let's
it's going to
yeah,
have a
let's
little bit.
okay. So let's start in going one at a time then, and they're in order. They're in the order he announced him here in, but I don't think he actually said specifically when some of these are coming out, so we don't know exactly what order
No, yeah,
yet. Um, Before we do that, I think one thought I had was, I mean, it's scattershot. It's kind of all over the place. That said, I think this could be. I mean, see, here's the thing: the few successes DC has had have come from that. So things like Harley Quinn, the Batman, stuff that like they didn't really connect it to anything, and they're wildly different in tone, right, and target audience, and they've done well. And I think what's interesting about this is it does seem like Gunn is embracing that because like I can easily see a PG Superman movie, a PG-13 Batman movie, an R-rated Authority movie, R-rated Swamp Thing, right? And something I didn't really I was thinking about this today too. I kind of forgot about this, but I was looking at Peacemaker again. The very first scene in that show, the first thing you see, is a black lesbian couple making out, which I totally had forgotten about until I rewatched the first episode. Which is an interesting way to open your Peacemaker show with two characters we've never heard
right.
of, by the way. Completely new characters aren't established. And one of the themes of a lot of James Gunn stuff is he does. I think what you've got here is something for everybody, right? Like no matter what you're looking for, or how old you are, or what you're interested in, or what themes interest you, there's something here that you could potentially be a super fan of. Whereas Marvel, I mean, one of the biggest criticisms of it is that it's a little bit homogenous. You either kind of like the MCU or you don't. And even as they try to diversify a bit, it's a little bit timid, like with their shows. Whereas with this one, like this slate, it's just all over the place. And yeah, it's risky,
Right.
but also potentially, look, there's a lot of people who probably will never care about Superman, but would love a Swamp Thing movie, and vice versa.
Indeed.
So in that spirit, let's go. Man, my computer's really chugging along here.
It's doing its best to just process your awesome diagram.
This diagram is just too much. It's too much.
It's just
I
way
can't
too
handle
much for it. It's like it can't handle the awesomeness. It's like
Can I make this bigger? Oh no, it's 1080p. Shoot, I should have thought about that
so.
all the time.
As your computer keeps chugging along, I'll add this. So one of the challenges then that Gunn has to face is connecting all these different kind of directions, right, into this
Right.
one cohesive, basically world, right? And so that was one of the things that we talked about offline about um the thing that needs to be done to be laid, have the foundation laid, would be proper world building, which is
Mhm.
something that we kind of don't really see a whole lot in the MCU. Like we know that things happen, and I think that's why, as you shared, why some of the stuff that they try to do with like Moon Knight and all the other shows that they've done is timid, because it's like I think one of the kind of the gripes and criticisms, like, well, how does Moon Knight connect to the greater MCU world? Like did the blip affect it, you know, and all these things, you know, and like
Right.
I think what James Gunn needs to do, which I'm confident that he can do, is build the world of the DCU and have this
Right.
giant sandbox for all these all these particular IPs to play in. Because I think that was one aspect that I still enjoy with the MCU, but it's just kind of been waning. Um, is like, yes, these are particular movies, then I can probably focus on one more than the other because I'm like a super fan of one. But like, I would like to know at the back of my mind, like, well, how does this connect to everything? Will I see Swamp Thing with, you know, Superman or with Batman or something like that? I still want that to happen,
Well,
right?
so
So
he is planting seeds for a lot of different stuff here,
right,
right? Whereas like yeah, the MCU is very much they start with the Avengers and now after like 10 plus years they're starting to branch out a bit. This is just right up front saying we're going to have our supernatural mystical stuff and some space stuff, right? And we're going to have our street level crime fighter stuff. We're just going to do it all. We're going to do it all. They'll probably see what works and what doesn't, right? And then they can adjust and build on things as they go. Which brings us to the very first item on our list. Let's see how I can zoom in enough here. Creature Commandos. So, Simon, you volunteered to take this one because none
I
of
sure
us
did.
know anything about this. Do you do you want to introduce us to the Creature
Yeah.
Commandos?
So
And tell us
Creature
what they're all
Commandos,
about?
yeah. So basically, it was an '80s comic book about this like secret military group of, in a way, of like universal monsters. Like, so there was a Frankenstein, there was Frankenstein's monster, there was a Gorgon that was like part of the
Right.
original team. There was a werewolf, and I forgot the other one, but they fought Nazis. So it's basically these classic monsters fighting the Third Reich. What could go wrong? That's my thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the very fact that now the team has changed and has evolved through time, and that's probably what we're seeing now. You know, we have like a Creature of the Black Lagoon female character, and correct me if I'm wrong, his name is Dr. Phosphorus, or
The skeleton guy, he's like a
yeah.
he's like a C-list Batman villain named Dr. Phosphorus.
Okay, yeah. So there's that. But basically, it's kind of like Suicide Squad, but in a sense that it's specifically classic monsters. The reason why I say that is because it's led by Rick Flag's father, Rick Flag Sr., which is the only, uh, you know, the very chiseled 50-year-old man in the picture, you know. And then you have Frankenstein's monsters, and there's a robot. There's a robot, and so it's just this is incredible for me. I'm stoked about this. I can't wait. And there's the Weasel guy from the Suicide Squad. But anyways,
So is this? Yeah, I do get the feeling. Is this gonna like you said? It's world building. Maybe
yes.
it's leading up to this is where the Suicide Squad originated, right? These teams of
Right,
freaks and
right.
monsters that they're using, right, to
Yeah.
fight to secretly
Yeah.
fight wars.
And I
And you
loved it
specifically
because-
said you were excited about this and Swamp Thing more than anything else, more than
Exactly.
Superman, more than Batman.
yes,
You
yes.
said you don't care about those, but you care about
Right.
this.
Yeah, I do, because one of the things that I think, and I mentioned to you before, like one of the things that I personally have a gripe with the MCU is like they it's a cliche word, but they secularized everything. So like when we first get introduced with Thor, it's like they're not actual deities of Norwegian mythology
magic.
or Viking mythology. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's just like they're just like more they're technologically advanced human beings. Like they're farther into their technology and stuff. And even though they don't explicitly admit it with Doctor Strange, it seems like that's also the case too. You know, where it's just like it's not really mystical, it's not supernatural. There's like no really demons or angels or even like a ultimate creator per se. But it's just like, oh no, this is just we just figured things out, you know, kind of thing. Hopefully DCU will preserve kind of that weirdness about like the occult and all this stuff, that there are supernatural beings at play within the universe, and that's why with Swamp Thing, you mentioned that like I think it was Alan Moore's iteration of it where
We'll
he's
get to
actually
Swamp
an
Thing.
avatar. Yeah,
We'll get to Swamp Thing. We don't.
Okay,
we
okay.
don't do that
Anyways.
yet.
Okay. Anyways, but Creature Commandos, like all these guys are supernatural in some way, shape, or form, and I always was interested in that. I loved even though it might have not have been critically acclaimed, I love Keanu Reeves' Constantine. I actually thought that was a great movie. I love
A
that
lot of
movie.
people
I
like
enjoyed
that movie. It's getting a sequel.
Yep.
I think they announced it.
Fan flipping tastic. And this stuff is kind of telling me that maybe, just maybe, we'll have a DCU world that deals with this stuff, and that Constantine can play in this, and we can maybe the sequel, who knows, gets into it.
We'll talk about Constantine, when we get to Swamp Thing.
So that's why I'm super excited. And look at the animation; it's phenomenal. It's
to be fair, it's interesting. This is the only thing they had to share from the whole new DC. This is it. It's funny to me that this is where they're starting. Although I can see how it kind of makes sense insofar as, and I think this is one of the big mistakes they made with the Snyderverse, right? Where they just went all in with their big premier characters right at the start.
Right.
And if something doesn't work, well, great. You've ruined a big premier character, right? Like they go straight to the death of Superman. I think it's smart to start with some of these characters. They're like, you know what? If this ends up not being that great, no one's gonna. I mean, Simon, I guess, will be very sad about it, but no one else will be.
I will milk this. I don't care what people would say.
Well, not only that, it's just going to be on a streaming service, so it's not even a movie. So
don't downplay it, guys. Don't downplay it.
I'm not saying I'm not downplaying it, but there's no risk in him having an animated series on HBO Max only. You know
we've been talking about Velma a little bit. Yeah, where hey, I've noticed that they're releasing 2 episodes a week of that because I think they realized they got some hype early on because it was controversial. They're trying to ride that really quick because they know that it's probably not going to have sustained viewership, right? So if stuff doesn't work on streaming, there's some flexibility there, right? So
right.
But there are rumors that this will transfer over into live action, and I think that's always been exciting for me personally.
Well, not rumors. James Gunn did say whatever actor they cast for role they want to use for everything. Okay. So presumably Weasel will be played because it's his brother, right?
It's his brother. Does that's right.
Yeah. So presumably he'll be making weasel noises for this show. Okay. I think we've dedicated enough time to Creature Commandos. There's so much more stuff to talk about. Let's move on to Waller. Josh, you mentioned that you have thoughts about Waller. I'd love to hear them. What do you? He didn't say anything about the plot of the show or what comics they might be looking at. So,
I think I don't have opinions yet. I have more questions than I do opinions. Is Waller gonna take Is Waller gonna be in proxy for season 2 of Peacemaker? Kind of how they use that. Yeah, the second half of Boba Fett for.
To be fair, I suspect a lot of the same people will be involved, and it won't just be a weird side project with a completely different showrunner.
But I think Waller definitely deserves more of a highlight in this DCU if you want to build it out, right? Because in the DC comics, she's a heavy hitter. She's like a Batman, a woman Batman, but doesn't walk around in a suit or a costume. You know what I mean? She's just living. She let it hang out. She has balls of steel. She has a big dick, and she likes to swing it around.
She makes Batman look a little bit silly sometimes. I remember her on the Justice League cartoon where they'd be confronting each other, and it's like she's just standing there in a suit, and she's got a cell phone, and he's in a bat costume, and it's like
in broad daylight.
Even as a kid, I'm like, is Batman crazy?
Yeah, and she's like, at times she could be like 3 steps ahead of Batman or the rest of the DCU, and creating plans and counteracting whatever's going on. She's always ready for something. So I think Viola Davis plays a great Waller, and I'm excited for it. But I think my question, because he did bring up, when I say he, I mean Gunn.
Jay Gunn
brought up that
we're not going to call him that.
Some of the actors or some of the characters from
I will.
Peacemaker will be interacting with the show as well. So
yeah,
is it going to be like a 2.0 or? But yeah.
So the question I have for you, right? Because here's the thing, right? I remember I was so excited when they first announced Viola Davis was going to play Amanda Waller in the Suicide Squad, because I remember her as such an important character in the cartoons, right? I never really read the comics much. I was like, oh, see that's a top tier villain, right? Because like everyone knows about Lex Luthor and the Joker news, but like if you want to build out a world, you need somebody who's more of a rival than a villain. Like she's not really like an enemy of the Justice League. She just doesn't like them, and
She's
feels like she can do their job better.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing that's really interesting about this is Viola. Oh, she won a Grammy, so she got the EGOT. She finally got it. She got an EGOT. How many people have actually done that? Probably not too many.
Nope. You're right.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering if this is similar to some of these other shows where they're going to basically do a soft reboot of her character. It's like, dude, they found the best actress for this role. Mm-hmm. And then they just made her look like an idiot in Suicide Squad, right? Like when they actually put her in, she was not like everything you just described, Josh, right? She was not that brilliant strategist, right? That we remember from the cartoons when she's just doing random stuff that doesn't make any goddamn sense. And I wonder if this is an attempt to then basically revitalize the character and turn her into I think what we all know she could be potentially, right? For the DCU.
So yeah, I was gonna comment that she has the potential to be better than Batfleck, right? Like the whole motive of Ben Affleck's Batman character is a very similar motive to Waller's, where it's just like, look, these are superpowered individuals. There's no accountability over them, and I'm representing humanity to protect ourselves from them. You know what I'm saying? So it's like a very legitimate motive, right? But she does it in a cunning, very ends justify the means way, right? And I think that's why you mentioned like the rival aspect of it. So yeah, you might be right that this might be a way to say, hey, we didn't give due credit to the type of character she is in Suicide Squad 1 and 2, and Peacemaker. Let's do that for this show. And I dare say, so I think I agree with you. Viola Davis is probably one of the few people that could just do this role well. I still love the actual voice actress who voiced her in the cartoons, CCH Pounder. I really think she has the voice, and anyways.
Yeah, they're not going to recast her, man.
I would love for her to do it, because
tell us you don't think Viola Davis is a good actress and you want her recast.
No, I don't want to make a general statement like that. I'm saying that CCH Pounder will be a better choice than Viola Davis. Well, as better choice than Viola Davis.
CCH Pounder deserves the role. Viola Davis does not deserve this role, is what you're saying.
I do. Okay, I'll say that in confidence. Wow. Yeah,
I think in confidence, Simon, we're putting this on YouTube.
Let's do this. I'm doing this. I'm going with it. CCH Pounder, you're the best. I love you. You should be Waller in this show.
Josh, do you have anything else to add to this?
Not to Simon's. Well, I think he. No, I got nothing to say, man. He's out there.
I mean, we don't know anything about the show yet, right? Like,
I think if we put a poll up, everyone will know Simon's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I think we just get the consensus to believe that Viola Davis is Waller now, like going forward. I didn't know who she was. CCH Pounder. No man, I don't look at her and see Waller.
She has the no. I think she's my Waller. She's my Waller. Yeah.
But I mean, no one's asking for Kevin Conroy to come and be the real Batman too.
Well, yeah, because
he's sounds like Batman. Doesn't want live action Kevin Conroy.
I'm sure that. Shut up.
I'm sure she could potentially play it, but I think Viola Davis is fine.
Hands down.
No.
She has the credentials to back it up.
Yeah, she's got an EGOT, man. How are you going to argue with that? How are you gonna argue with that?
Sometimes it doesn't. I don't think it justifies it. But anyways, I'm just we can move on.
All
But
right.
like Waller, I think Waller's gonna be one of the top shows to watch out for.
Yeah.
Because there's gonna be a bunch like some mystery, some suspense going on.
Right.
I think it's gonna be a really good show.
I mean, if it's anywhere near as good as Peacemaker was, it'll be great, right? Because it'll be that, but with more Viola Davis.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm pretty excited for it, even though we know nothing.
Right.
So, all right. So then we'll move on to the next item on our list, and that is Superman Legacy. So I'll get the ball rolling on this one because I have. This is where shit gets real, right? Because this is where we start talking about Grant Morrison, basically. So James Gunn has been very upfront about saying like they are going to look to Superman, All-Star Superman, as like kind of their inspiration. Not so much for the plot, but for the tone and for the characterization, right? It's going to be younger Superman. What they say, like 25.
Yeah.
But they're really going to want to go for this sort of like presentation of the character. So this All-Star Superman was a comic written by Grant Morrison, illustrated by Frank Quietly. I think most people consider it to be the best Superman comic ever written. I certainly do. I'm not sure what else. I mean, I'm not a huge Superman fan, so maybe I'm not the best of third in that. But I mean, I have yet to read anything that comes close to this in terms of just like scope and understanding of the character, right? And if you want to reestablish who Superman is, this is definitely a good place to look for inspiration. This is also interesting because when you start looking at some of these writers, and we'll dig into this a bit more as we go. So Grant Morrison, for The Authority, we'll talk about him more later, right? We have Warren Ellis, and then over here we have Tom King, and is it Bilquis Evely? I hope I'm saying that right. This is interesting to me because we're not looking at Frank Miller comics anymore, right? So I was really surprised to see him not only reference like these comics, but even in the Twitter thread that followed, he did mention like he's friends with Grant Morrison. They talk all the time, and is implying that he's consulting with him on some of the scripts he's writing for these movies. Really interesting because Grant Morrison kind of rose to prominence, kind of started in the late 80s, but really hit his stride like in the 90s, 2000s. And again, a lot of people consider him to be the best comic book writer ever, right? I'm not sure if I'd go that far, but he's definitely hugely influential. And his body of work is like he's written so many goddamn comic books. It's just a very different direction to take these movies. I don't know that any DC movies have really looked at anything post 80s, with the exception of maybe the Batman, right, as inspiration. The Dark Knight Returns came out in the late 80s. Everyone freaked out about it, and no one's been able to get past it in like 40 years. So this is really exciting to me. It's a different direction for the character. Well, not a different direction. It's a more classic direction. But Grant Morrison has a knack for taking these classic elements and kind of like making them feel new again, right? And introducing new ideas that fit. And so I'm really excited to see where this goes. I assume, he's right. So James Gunn said he's writing the script for this. He hasn't said if he's directing it or not. And I'm still trying to decide if he should. I think he could, but I also feel like he'd probably rather move on to directing like The Authority, right? Or Batman or something. But I don't know who else he could hand this off to that would inspire confidence in me right now, right? It's hard to say. Like Superman is such a iconic character. It's very difficult, I think, to get him right. I mean, so many directors have taken a crack at this and failed. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Is this? I mean, have you read All-Star Superman? Do you guys think this is like the right direction to take things?
I read the first six. The first six comic books, like the individual comic books, not the volumes or the graphic novels, but the actual book, like the weeklies or dailies or something. Weeklies, bi-weeklies, whatever they are. Anywho, so I didn't get too far. But I did see the animated rendition of it, which I know doesn't.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not a full adaptation of the comic book, but
It's good.
it was
I
very
liked it.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I think as far as James Gunn directing, I think he's going to. I mean, you want to leave your staple like because
Mm.
we're Superman's going to be opening up this chapter for his this new phase, or I don't know if you this new chapter,
Okay, so that's right. He did say like this. He considers this the official start, right, to what he's calling the
right?
DCU. Yeah.
So to make your stamp and say this is what this is. This is my direction. I think he's going to direct it. I think he's going to direct it. Yeah, after he's done writing it. Um, but he has mentioned that like he has a team of comic book writers to consult with, like a council. So that's I think going to help him a lot. Stay in line, help with continuity, throughout the his storylines for all his movies and shows. So I think it's going to be good. I really do. Looking forward to it. I hope Parasite's in it. To be honest with you, I hope
Mm.
there's a Parasite because Parasite's a character we haven't seen, but is freaking crazy. Like I don't know what it is, but he doesn't give me nightmares, but he does like leave a chill in my spine. Like when I hear or see him, I'm just like,
Mm.
man, that's so crazy. This guy can walk by, touch you, and just take your life force, just take your thoughts, your memories, your abilities. And for
Right.
like a hero, that is like everyone's kryptonite, right? Even
Right.
Batman.
Right.
You
So
know what I
yeah,
mean?
that's
So
it's the one character that Superman would genuinely have a tough time dealing with, right? Because he
right,
can't
and
touch
just
him.
like yeah, and that's like your power is touching. It's punching really hard.
Yeah.
So he's gonna have to use his eye heat revision and his cold breath the whole time and try to fly away.
Hmm.
But no, I'm excited though. Really excited. I think James Gunn is gonna end up directing it.
Do you think though he should?
The
That's
only
a different question. I
yeah.
want him to. I
Okay.
want to see him do something with this tone of a character, right? With this high profile of a character. If he could make this work and blow, I think if he can make this work, no one will doubt him. Everyone's going to jump on the bandwagon. I believe people will leave Marvel and come to DC if he directs this and does a stand up job. If he blows this up in a good
Right.
way.
Okay. So if he can do Superman, if he can do everything from because like he's a lot of what he's done. Because Guardians of the Galaxy is pretty PG, but it's also very weird and alternative, right?
Right.
Outside of that, I mean, his roots are in like horror movies and
So I was gonna
gory
say
stuff. What's that movie he
he
made?
he
Super, right?
he
So,
did a Superman movie already, an origin Superman movie.
oh
His
right,
take on
Oh
it,
yeah.
Brightburn.
Brightburn,
Yeah.
Elseworlds, yeah.
and
If he can do this alongside that, that is
that's
pretty huge
impressive.
range.
That'll be
Yeah.
impressive. Yes, 100%. So
Yeah.
that'll be very impressive.
So Josh, you just mentioned like people wanting to leave Marvel. So I mean, I have a hard time seeing something that drastic happening, but it did occur to me, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. But Grant Morrison and Frank Quietly they've worked on a lot of stuff, not just for DC. They have also worked on stuff for Marvel. They did a really epic run on X-Men, the new X-Men, right?
Yep.
It was the comic run because like after who was the guy who made X-Men big in the 80s? So the stuff that the cartoons
Claremont?
Claremont, right? So after Claremont left, there were a few years where like they were struggling to figure out what to do with X-Men, right? They couldn't recapture the
Right.
magic. They brought him along and he just like lit that thing on fire. He made Cyclops cool again, right? Like
Right.
and I'm wondering if Superman and Batman are both successful, being inspired by his work and taking cues from his plots and his stories. Do you see that potentially influence the direction of the MCU? Because they haven't started the X-Men yet. It's probably going to be a while before they really kick off live action
Right.
X-Men.
Right.
We already know they're going to use the animated X-Men to maybe go back and do more of that classic 80s style stuff. But they haven't really said anything about what they're going to do with the movies or the TV shows.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sam. No, go
I was
ahead,
gonna
Sam.
say, I think you're right. the very fact that we're gonna see the X-Men after going back to MCU and the production plans, we're gonna see X-Men potentially after Kang Dynasty and all that. Like, it's almost as if it's almost as if, yeah, maybe there's this wait time to see how these stories by you said Morrison quietly will kind of, because when is Superman coming out? 2025, right? Yeah. So like I'm thinking you might be right. You might be right, and seeing like, hey, you know what? This take might be attracting a new consumer base, right? And it's like, why don't we? Yeah. So there's kind of like this we'll see and find out kind of
Oh
feel,
wow!
you know?
When you say that out loud, we'll be getting Fantastic Four, the
Yeah.
X-Men during this time. So
Yeah.
we'll have some like fresh new properties. Yeah,
That's
wow.
exactly right. Even, but I think we'll even get. I think Fantastic Four is going to be the first one that comes out around this time. But it's been expressed, I believe, like in 2027, we'll probably see X-Men. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just
Yeah.
like, so I'm thinking if maybe the robot Feige is just waiting just to see, okay, what will Jay Gunn do, Jimmy G, you know? Um, Anyways, what will
It's
he
not.
do?
We're not doing it, Simon. I'm sorry.
No, no, no.
Right.
1/3 is going to do it. I'm doing it, um, and we'll see what he does with it. If it explodes in popularity,
Right.
yeah, I totally think that
I
Feige will say,
mean,
yeah, let's do this. I'm bored. I'm on
I
board.
mean,
Let's
you
go for it.
definitely don't want to go up against, even if it's only mediocre, you don't want to go up against a Superman movie in like summer blockbuster season or the
Right?
holidays, right? And they would have to deal with that somehow. Like, no matter, Marvel has had no serious competition pretty much the entire time they've been operating. Like, different studios have tried and failed. In some cases embarrassingly, right? But if
Right.
James Gunn can pull this off successfully, right now Marvel has to work around Superman and Batman movies just all over the goddamn place.
And I think that what you just said right there is ultimately what excites me. It's the market competition that 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 MCU and Kevin Feige has to face now.
So
Like,
they got to keep
I bet
Feige on their toes. What you're
they
saying?
please let's do this. I hope so. And it's just like, because I think they just really truly MCU relied on its laurels, and I was just like, yeah, we could just do whatever. There's nothing there right now. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just like, just to have this announcement is, I think, pressure for Feige, and just like, oh, okay, um, we got to do something. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, and there's, I bet he knew far in advance what Jay Gunn's gonna do. You know what I'm saying? I bet he knew that. I know that there must have been talk before. You know
I'm
what I'm
sure
saying?
they're
And
I'm
so
sure
it's
they're
just
at
like,
least aware of in the industry of what people are doing. Which
right.
so actually let's use that as an opportunity to move on to Lanterns. Again, we don't know much about this other than that it's got Green Lanterns in it, but it is a show. And I do want to point out here, half of what they announced is HBO Max, and I think that's significant because I think I mentioned there's been some news out that Disney is looking to license more of their content outside of Disney Plus, that they're just not seeing success with their streaming service like they'd hoped, right? Because originally they were trying to claw stuff back to put it all on Disney Plus and make that, I think,
That's
under
a
the
whole
assumption
nother
that,
episode. That's a whole
yeah,
nother
we'll have
show,
to
'cause,
talk about that. But the assumption
I
being that their brand is so strong, of course, people will sign up for Disney Plus. But now, if even half of this stuff is any good, HBO Max,
right.
especially now they've cleaned house a bit, what they're probably doing is creating budget so they can put more into these things, right? Because they're gonna have to pay Viola Davis a lot of money to do a whole series.
Right.
Again, we could be back in a world where HBO Max has the premier content, right? So yeah, Lanterns. Josh, did you want to talk about Lanterns? I think we were mentioning that.
Yeah, I think we got a little bit of what. So, the lanterns and the premises, they're going to be like detectives, and they're going to be following this lead that's been that they get, protecting Earth. And we won't just have one lantern, we'll have two lanterns. I think two of the greatest lanterns, Hal Jordan and John Stewart.
Right.
John Stewart's more of the, was it late '90s, early 2000s.
And he was also on the Justice League cartoon. To me, Jon Stewart was the Green Lantern. I had no idea who Hal Jordan was until I was like in my 20s. I'd never even heard of him. But Jon Stewart, he was the one in the cartoons. That was Green Lantern to me. So
yeah. So for kids like you, Jordan, Jon Stewart is your favorite. But people like me back in the day, Hal Jordan was the man. But to see them both, not have to have this debate, who we're gonna get. Let's put them both in there. I mean, they're both gonna be guarding it, and who knows? It might not even be buddies. It might be like frenemies. Like we have to work with each other because Gaia chose us. Is it Gaia? Is that what it's called?
No, it's the Guardians, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Guardians chose us, or the Ring chose us. So
I think you were mixing franchises together with Captain Planet.
Captain Planet.
Rings, man. It's all about the rings.
Yeah, that's right.
Different colored rings.
The power of hot.
So the whole he mentions True Detective, right? And I immediately went to so it's like a buddy cop kind of thing. But True Detective isn't really a buddy cop show because they don't really like it's this one detective who's like this weird guy who says weird, creepy stuff all the time, and the other one just really doesn't want to be around him, but he has to.
Right.
And I do wonder if it's going to be very much like a. God, I mean, it's such a tired trope, but it works so well, right? Lethal Weapon, right? Where you have these two cops who are just very different, but they have to work together. And we have seen Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, I mean, be straight up enemies even before in different iterations of these characters. So
yeah, so that gets me excited, man, because he did say they're gonna uncover this new threat that's gonna build this universe. So that'd be cool to see that uncover and how it plays out. So
let's before we move on, I kind of wanted, because we actually didn't touch on this in any of the discussion we've had so far this week. What do you guys think that's going to be? What do you think this, because like where my mind goes immediately, and they've done this in the cartoons a few times, and I know that they've done the comics a million times, is Apocalypse, right? Where there's agents of Apocalypse on Earth doing some stuff. But I don't think I feel like that would be too soon to go that big,
I think it's going to be Brainiac of some sort, especially if lanterns are going to be involved. Like outer world terrestrial type thing. I think it's going to be. I think it'll be Brainiac. I think getting a whole universe against Earth, that you have to build a lot of characters up. You have to build some powerhouses.
I mean, we're not ready for the new gods.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I mean? 25-year-old Batman, Superman, and Batman with a kid have no chance.
Tom King, we'll talk about this more later. Tom King has done a lot of New Gods stuff. So I assume that's coming eventually. Chapter 5 or 4. Well, yeah, it's coming. But yeah, it's probably still too soon to go that deep.
Yeah, so I'm guessing it's going to be like Brainiac, a character we haven't seen before. Maybe only in games and cartoons, but never in live action.
Yeah, he's never been in the movies. There's a lot of stuff we're going to see here that's never been in live action before, even though it's been part of established DC continuity for like 100, like in some cases, 100 years, right?
Right.
So yeah, okay. So I don't know, Simon, do you have any thoughts on? Do you agree, like Brainiac?
I don't. Yeah, no. I mean, like I was trying to think. By default was the New Gods and Apocalypse and Darkseid and all that.
I don't.
I've just been sitting here. I've been sitting here grinding my teeth in silence, just furious.
No.
It's so wrong.
No, that's it's. You know what it's gonna be? The great threat is Condiment King. That's who it's gonna be. So there, yeah. Anyways, no, I don't know who the bigger threat would be in the DC universe aside from Darkseid and aside from Apocalypse and all that, right? And so it's just like, I'm not the right person to ask, basically. But I wouldn't mind seeing Brainiac. I think the very fact, the kind of character that he is, he wants to collect worlds, shrink them, and it's kind of like Galactus Light, if you will, you know what I'm saying? But it's just like I wouldn't mind seeing that as the first initial threat that they would have to deal with, and then go to the new gods afterwards, kind of thing. So yeah.
I am going to go out on a limb, and I know I'm going to be wrong, and say that maybe what the threat they discover is the conspiracy that leads to the creation of the next thing we're going to talk about, which is the Authority. Right. So the Authority was like a secret government project to create superheroes that could be controlled, right? And then they kind of go rogue, and they form their own. Essentially, they form their own Justice League, but outside of the authority of any government. This is kind of the theme of it: is they declare themselves the Authority, and they just do whatever they want, and that's kind of the whole theme of the comic. So this is, I haven't read this one in a while. I was revisiting some of it recently. This is a very, very, very weird comic book that was done under the Wildstorm imprint by Warren Ellis back in the 90s. And it is basically like the Justice League, but what if they were kind of assholes, right? And they don't mean like The Boys, where literally Superman is like a fascist murderer, but just like what if they were all kind of like the Punisher, where they decided that the ends justify the means.
Right.
And it's okay for them to do what they got to do sometimes, even if that means just, executing people that they feel are too dangerous to be left alive, right? You've got characters, and now we do not have time to talk about all the characters and stuff that make this up. But the two most important ones are Midnighter, who you see here, and Apollo, who is, well, he's right here.
Yeah.
This guy right here.
You see his chest down. You don't see his face.
And they are basically analogs of Batman and Superman. So the Midnighter is like this guy who wears all black and, works at night and beats people up. Apollo is powered by the sun. They're both taken a bit more literally than Batman or Superman are. So like Apollo, his powers, he really is dependent on the sun. Like he dies if he doesn't have access to it. And Midnighter has like genetic alterations that make him tougher, that make him smarter, right? His brain is basically like a tactical computer, like an organic tactical computer that he can use to like outthink anybody, right? And another interesting angle to this, and I mentioned there's something in this slate for everybody, right? Apollo and Midnighter are both gay, and there's this whole subplot in the comic where they fall in love and get married. And when they merge the Wildstorm universe with the DCU, I think it was New 52, they did that. They kept that. So it's basically like, what if Batman and Superman were gay and they were married to each other?
You Simon, they have stuff for you too.
They got something for everybody. Well,
For
this is
everybody.
interesting to me because you know why this is interesting to me? It's because Disney has gotten a lot of flack, not so much for not doing stuff like this, but for wanting to have their cake and eat it too, because they don't want to offend anyone, right? So they don't want to offend progressives, so they include queer people in their stuff. But it's always like some background character, or they tell you in press, like, what was it, the Beauty and the Beast, right? They made that one guy gay.
Yeah.
But they never say that in the movie or anything. They just announced it on their Twitter or something.
Right.
So it's like they want the credit, but they're not willing to actually step out on a limb and take a risk, right? James Gunn has proven that he's willing to do that, right? And so I think we're going to get like these are going to be gay superheroes. They're probably going to like make out on screen. If this is R-rated, who knows what they're going to do, right? And I think it will be, because if they adapt the comic accurately, it'll have to be. And if James Gunn directs this himself, and I am 100% certain he will write and direct this himself, if nothing else. I mean, it could be on the same level as something like the Suicide Squad, right? But just, with more superpowers and a bigger budget. So do you guys have any thoughts?
What you were well, I wanted to ask you a question. So what you were saying about the whole conspiracy that led up to this, do you think that in the DCU that they're kind of they'll be like the enemies of the DCU? Because like you mentioned Apollo and Midnight being derivatives of Batman and Superman, right? And so it's just like we have Batman and Superman in the DCU. So like how maybe not enemies, but how would you see that dynamic happen?
That's a good question.
How would that work?
This is one of the riskier aspects of this slate, because and this has happened so many times with DC, and it's one of the reasons I think it's been a challenge to make the DC universe a thing on screen. It's harder than it is for Marvel. Marvel, all of their big characters were created as part of the Marvel universe, and they're designed to exist together in the Marvel universe. And the world they live in is our world, right? It's New York. right? It's Los Angeles. DC, it's all fictional cities, and these characters are mostly created independently of each other. In some cases, existing for decades at separate publishers like Fawcett Comics, right, Wildstorm, stuff like that, and then were acquired by DC at some point, and then like folded in. So many of DC characters are like that, right? We were talking about The Question the other day. Like that was a Charlton Comics character. They were not incorporated into DC until like the 90s, right? Like that was like pretty recent. I actually worry about including them in the DCU because after they folded them in with the New 52, they haven't really done much at all. Midnighter has become a recurring character in like Nightwing stories. As almost like a sort of mirror image of like, it's like, oh, well, he's Batman, except like he effectively has no morals, right? And it's like a challenge for Nightwing to deal with that, with a guy who's like just as good as Batman is, but like essentially is willing to do what Batman would never do. And that's kind of interesting. Apollo hasn't done much at all. And I think the reason is because writers have struggled to figure out what to do with him, right? Because they're not just going to like fight Superman and Batman. They're not really enemies. But it's hard to, I don't know how that works. I cannot figure out how the hell this is supposed to work as part of the DCU because they've never been able to make it work in the comics, even after folding them in.
And maybe that's kind of one of Jay Gunn's exciting like reasons to do it. I know you mentioned though, like this is a passion project, but maybe that's something that he wants to take on that challenge. It's like, hey,
I'm sure he
know
does. I think that's why he wants to do this. And I think he's earned himself enough credit, especially if Superman is a success. They'll give him the leeway to do this, even if it doesn't succeed. Yeah. If it fails, okay, then he just won't make another one, right? And then they'll move on to Batman, right? But yeah, this is weird. And it's worth noting, Quietly also was the artist on this book. So Quietly could end up having a massive impact on just the aesthetics of this universe going forward, his art. Warren Ellis wrote this. Grant and Ellis, I think they're both British, right? Grant is Scottish. I bring that up because I feel like English writers have they tend to take a very different approach to superheroes, a much more like literate approach, and they dig a lot deeper into like classical literature for inspiration, right? You see that influence in Superman, you see that in The Authority, you see it in Grant Morrison's Batman. That's another thing here where I think we are going to get a version of DC that is really smart, maybe too smart. Because it's one thing to do that in a comic book that has like 50 issues where you can build a lot of ideas. It's a whole other thing to try to fit that into a summer blockbuster movie. It's another risky element of this where like, is this too smart? Is there too much? Are there too many big ideas being thrown out here? And this movie right here, I think, will be the kind of the proof in the pudding of whether like James Gunn really can do what he wants to do. Like if he tries this and it fails hard, I mean, I don't think they're going to pull him out of this, and I think he'll continue to have success with other more established characters. But I think to him, this is like the peak. This is like the peak of Everest that he's climbing towards, right? And if he can pull this off, he can die a happy man, right? If he can make this work. So,
all
right. Any more thoughts on this before we move on?
Let us move on.
Have you guys? Neither of you have read this comic, have you?
No, I knew parts of it. So yeah, I never read it. I knew parts of it. I think one of the reasons why I kind of was standoffish of it is just because of like, because they defeat Jesus Christ. Like literally, they defeat Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
it's a weird comic. So, anyway, go read it and then go read Planetary, which is a spin-off of this. Really great book.
Apparently, we can't read it because it's been sold out everywhere, right?
That's true. It's been selling out.
Yeah, it's been selling like hotcakes now. So one of these days.
Yeah, I should mention these guys up here, right? They're making some money right now from all these comic book sales. So
I'm sure. There's there's going to be some gift baskets to Jay Gunn's door sooner than later.
Actually, worth acknowledging before we move on to Wonder Woman. again, I always feel kind of bad sometimes with some of these Marvel movies where like I go see them, some of them I enjoy, some of the TV shows I enjoy. But I also know that a lot of the creators who wrote the comics that these are based on, that inspired a lot of these stories, they ain't getting jack shit for this,
Yeah,
right?
no,
They're
that's
getting
true.
nothing.
That's true.
They don't
Yeah,
own the
that's kind of one of the-
characters. They might have copyright, and they might get residuals from the original book sales, but they're not getting anything from the movie or the show.
Mm-hmm.
But Gunn, again, he's hiring comic book writers. He's looping them in. I don't know, just nice. It's nice to see that.
Okay. Yeah.
Paradise Lost. What do we think? They didn't really say much about this other than it's going to be Game of Thrones, but on Themyscira.
In Themyscira, right? Yeah. So,
I have no idea what I think about this.
Yep. Again, I think it's just part of the world building, and that's something that will be, and it's going to be targeting that kind of that kind of audience that likes that sort of things, right? So,
right.
Aside from that, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, so you mentioned, that kind of audience. So you can't see it here, but this woman here in the corner, in the video, they kind of like pan down, and she's driving a sword right through the neck of some dude. Just so much blood just gushing out of both sides of his neck. So presumably this is going to be a very violent show. There's different versions of the Amazon's history in the comics. They're mostly pretty violent. War with the gods, right? War with ancient kingdoms. Sometimes civil wars, right? Because there's like because there's Themyscira, but then there was like a band of Amazons.
Yeah. No, there was, right. There was, my sister actually had the omnibus comic where there was a faction of those that like supported Artemis to be the new Wonder Woman, and then Diana had like a different costume and stuff like that. It was interesting. So that reminded me of that Civil War thing. Reminded me of what you were just saying. So yeah. But anyways,
Okay.
And we think, sorry, you guys think that this is going to be pre or post?
very like thousands of years pre. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I don't
think
think
timeline.
Yeah, I don't think they'll introduce Diana
Wonder Woman?
in this show. No, I don't.
He said nothing about Gal Gadot in this announcement. So we know they're recasting Superman. We know they're recasting Batman. I have a hard time believing they're going to do that and not recast Wonder Woman. Honestly, I'm skeptical they're keeping any of these characters, even the Flash, although they're not saying it.
They can't say anything right now. It wouldn't be. It would be dumb for them to.
But this is an opportunity to start over, and they can introduce a completely new Wonder Woman at some point. Because this is going to be thousands of years ago, right? This is going to be like ancient history. And it is world building. Something that I complained about a lot with the Snyderverse, which is like they didn't really do any world building at all. They just jump right into like bring the three of them together, and then they fight Doomsday, and that's it.
Yeah.
So it'll be nice to explain how this society works. Explain how they reproduce, because there's different versions of that in the comics. There
are different versions.
They're just made from clay.
There's
right. One
that's
where
they're dipped in water. Yeah.
There's one where they're all reincarnations of women who died violently. And that's like if you're a woman who dies unjustly due to unjust violence, you get like reincarnated on Themyscira as like some kind of reward. And then there's one where they stick with the original mythology where they just kidnap men. And then if they have any male sons, they just abandon them in the woods, right? Like there's different versions of this, and I think it'd be good to establish what they're trying to do.
Maybe all three will be different stages of their history.
Maybe they got to work their way up to creating life.
Yeah,
from
exactly.
soil.
Yeah, they've evolved in society, and they've been blessed by certain gods, so that at the end they reproduce with clay and living water or something like that. But before it was savage times, So.
You had to do what you had to do.
You got to do, yeah, exactly. Biology kicks in sooner or later.
And so this being on HBO Max, we're all assuming it's going to be MA rated, right?
Oh yeah.
I would not doubt that.
He's not going to come out here and say it's going to be like Game of Thrones, and then it not be.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of I assume there's going to be a lot of sex and violence in this, presumably.
First 10 minutes was an incestuous affair in a high tower. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll
Yeah, I
happen.
think Lanterns will be mature audience. Waller will be mature audience, and Paradise Lost for sure.
Yeah.
Oh wow,
They
that's
might, you
interesting.
know, they might adjust them a little bit here or there, but like these all seem like they want these to. I assume they want these ones to be like these prestige HBO Max dramas, right? Like that's what they want to get those streaming numbers. So like these will probably be targeted at like an adult audience more than anything, because it's like, look, they've already got freaking Creature Commandos over here for the kids and Simon.
Well, shucks. I mean,
Um,
if they're going to utilize 90s comics, that's in essence the audience, right? That's
Right.
so it's you know, imagine like they're 15, 13, 14, 15-year-old, 9 years, so 20, 30 years. So yeah, so it's like it's going to be for adults basically.
Yeah.
So 90s
So
kids.
speaking of things that
Booster Gold.
let's talk about. So I think we're all kind of big fans of Booster Gold. I think Josh, you might be more a fan of this character than anybody because you brought him up before, even before the announcement.
Yeah,
Actually, you mentioned him as this is a character you would like to see as part of this like
right.
reboot.
I think I also love to see Henry Cavill play him.
Yes.
It'd be hilarious.
Henry Cavill
Especially
Booster Gold. That would be that'd be phenomenal.
him not
That'd
being
be so
Superman, but
good.
he's Buster Gold, and
Yeah.
like so, this character's identity in the future was like he was this up and coming prospect, a football prospect, and he didn't want to wait, and do his time in college and all that. So he ended up making bets with the wrong people, got caught, and ended his career abruptly. And so ends up working in a museum where he learns about all these past superheroes and their glory, Batman, Superman, and how they just ruled the golden era of superheroes. And so he's like, man, this is great. And he found some alien technology. He had this little robot named Skipper that was his best friend, and also found a little time machine. And thought, you know what? I'm gonna fix things. I'm gonna go back in time to become the greatest superhero ever.
Right.
And so, not knowing what the golden era really is, only hearing it in mythos and in a museum, realizing that Superman, Batman, all these characters in the past had no pride or no ego, right? It was really just there was a drive to them to be better, to do better. He realized he's not on par with them at all and decides to sell his services and get sponsored and become, famous via news and media for the time that, the early 70s or 80s. So it's going to be fun to see how they adapt this character, um, to current times because we got social media, we got, all
Right.
these who knows? OnlyFans. He might be appearing on OnlyFans.
Booster Gold would 100% have an OnlyFans. He would absolutely have an OnlyFans. You know he would.
He might be a podcaster, a YouTube
He'll do
influencer.
everything. Yeah.
He'd be
He'll do
live
everything.
streaming his heroics every chance he could. But,
Right. And he became famous, in the comic books,
yeah.
but he was an imposter, and I think that's when James Gunn really highlighted, he's gonna have imposter syndrome. He's gonna be walking around knowing he's
Right.
not what these guys are, trying to do what these things are. He's a loser, trying to make a name for himself in this era where like superheroes were the greatest there ever was. So I'm intrigued. I want to see who's going to play him. There are a lot of rumors out there, but what do you guys think?
He's gonna create an NFT.
Oh my God, he would totally get into NFTs. See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
There's so much
Booster
potential
coins.
in our
Oh my gosh, there is.
contemporary context for a character like this. For a character
Like,
this
what if he
like
created
obsessed
crypto? What if
with
he's the
fame.
crypto creator?
He created crypto.
That'd be
He
great,
created
dude.
Bitcoin.
So here's one of the things about it is yes, he can time travel. He has the time travel device, right? But also he doesn't
No, so
he does
he time traveled. He came to the past and he's stuck here.
it depends on which version. The initial
Right,
one
okay,
does,
yeah.
So I'm not super familiar with Booster Gold. The only thing I only really know him from The Brave and the Bold. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a bit. But Batman, The Brave and the Bold, it's a cartoon that was very popular. It's based on an old comic book series. And even though it's Batman, they use this as an opportunity to kind of just play with all these B and C level characters that aren't as well known, right? I think most famously, he would team up with Aquaman a lot. And this might be my favorite version of Aquaman. And I would love it if this was the version of Aquaman we got in the DCU.
Voiced by John DiMaggio.
By John
also known
DiMaggio.
as outside band. Yeah, he's great.
Singing whale songs when he's sad. But also, he would team up often with Booster Gold. There he is right there. And Blue Beetle. And Velma Dinkley. He teams up with everybody in the show, guys. I'm serious, like literally everybody. Wow. But the Booster Gold and Blue Beetle are main supporting characters in the show. They show up a lot. And it's funny because, yeah, you're right. Booster Gold is shallow and obsessed with fame. And yes, has imposter syndrome. Like he wishes he was like Batman. He desperately, desperately wants to be like Batman. And he does everything on the surface he can to try to give off the appearance of being like Batman. But he has none of the skills or the dedication or the focus or the drive or the experience or any of it. And that contrast is very funny in this show. Like he's just this shallow, self-obsessed, annoying asshole, and he's following Batman around all the time and telling people that him and Batman are bros, and he hangs out in the Batcave all day, right? And another interesting thing about this, going up in my conspiracy chart, Tom King is a big fan of Booster Gold as a character. He uses him a lot. I don't know if you've read any of these, Josh. He has a 3-issue sort of like arc in Tom King's Batman run where it's called The Gift, where Booster Gold, he goes back in time and he saves Bruce Wayne's parents as a wedding present for his marriage to Catwoman.
Wow.
And of course, just fucks up reality by changing the past. And then Batman, when he realizes what's happened, decides that he'd rather not be because he's not Batman anymore when he comes back, right? Decides that he doesn't want to be Batman. He wants to keep his parents alive. And so now Booster Gold has figured out how to go back in time and kill Batman's parents. It's insane, dude. It's a weird story, but it uses this character so perfectly. Like he's such an idiot. Like he just thinks, oh, this is good, and he just does stuff without thinking first, right? And he thinks, oh, this is a great plan, and it's going to be awesome, and he ends up shooting himself in the foot. So yeah, I'm excited for this. I think you're right. Henry Cavill would be some great stunt casting. It would be awesome to see Henry Cavill as just a loser first, like in the future, just like. It would be great to see the famous, handsome, super jacked Henry Cavill just being a loser somewhere. Like maybe in the future, everybody is handsome and jacked because they have like
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and
he's
not special at all. He's like the shortest guy around, and so he decides to come back because finally he can be somebody in the past. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I don't know who else they would cast right now. Because he is such a weird character. Like, it's a character that could easily be grating and annoying and unpleasant, right? Like, it's a really fine balance to create a character who's unlikable, but in a way that's fun to watch. Right. That's so hard to do. So, yeah. But I'm excited for this. I'm really interested to see how this turns out. Simon, do you have any thoughts? Yeah. Or are we?
I had a thought, but I don't know if I should mention it. So
why not, Simon?
Why would you even tell us that? Yes, I do, but don't.
It's called hashtag suspense. No, I'm just kidding. The way that you describe this character, I just know him from the show and all that, so I don't know full well this like. But the way that you describe this character, I'm just thinking of like, in the worst sense, I'm just thinking of like Logan Paul. He'd be like, he would be an ideal Booster Gold.
That's perfect. If Logan Paul wanted to be a superhero, yes, this is what he would. This is what.
Dude, I feel that that's totally this guy's shtick. You know what I'm saying? And And then what he did, like the whole NFT idea that I thought of, like I was just thinking about, like kind of the controversy that he's going through with his NFT and stuff like that. And I was just like, this is exactly what someone who
It would
might
definitely
like.
be some really sharp meta commentary on society.
Yeah.
If Logan Paul played Booster Gold,
Booster Gold, yeah, that'd be so
just-
on point. That'd be so on point.
just tearing into everything he is as a person in this
right.
character.
Yeah.
And in the
He
end,
wouldn't
he
be
just
aware
helped
that he's
people
doing
that
that. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Oh.
He wouldn't be aware that he's even like playing this character. Who's
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Like,
that'd
hey,
be the funniest thing. Like James Gunn playing the ultimate joke on him, you know, like,
Yeah.
no, this isn't you. No, it's not.
no. Are you sure? I really feel like it's a mirror, Jay Gunn. I really like Jimmy
It
G.
will
I really
tell me
feel that
otherwise.
this is a mirror.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So that's Booster Gold.
All right.
So let's move on to the biggest news, I think. Well, second biggest news for me. Batman, the Brave and the Bold. So this one's really interesting to me because it's titled The Brave and the Bold. But then he talks about it having Damian Wayne. He uses this image from the cover of Grant Morrison's run where he introduces Damian Wayne, and it's called Batman and Son. This was another run. I don't think Quietly did all of it, but I think he did start this run with Morrison.
He did a few, like, he was blowing up Batman. This is like before much, like 2011, 12, 13 maybe.
Yeah.
But he did Batman and Robin. He did Batman Incorporated, which is a totally different run. And I believe he did one more Batman series. There's like 3 Batmans. I remember because we bought all the tie-ins. My wife had to have them because she loved little Damon Wayans. So yeah, we had to have them all.
Is
But,
that why you guys taught your child how to fight and put other
to choke
children
little
in?
girls out? Yep.
While speaking Mandarin.
That explains so much.
We say, Justice, you choke everyone out equally, okay? Whether they're straight, whether they're gay, whether they're female, whether they're male, or if they identify as anything.
They touch
You
your
choke them
toes.
out
All inclusive. Yes.
equally. You choke them out equally. Okay?
For the sake of YouTube, we're joking. Josh did not actually tell his son to beat up other children.
This is all in jest. Yes.
Right.
But apparently
Our
he does.
podcast is theatrical.
Apparently he does.
Yeah.
He does know. He does have skills, and you should respect him if you ever come across him. But yeah, this one's interesting because it's like, okay, so like they're doing both, right? They want to have Damian Wayne. We're gonna have Robin on screen for the first time in a long time, and it sounds like it's gonna actually be a child, because the last time it feels like every time they've done Robin real life, they just pick a guy who's like in his 20s and then tell you he was a teenager. Dude, do you remember in the Joel Schumacher movies, right? They brought up what's his face?
Chris O'Donnell, bro.
Chris O'Donnell.
Chris O'Donnell.
Who is like, he is a grown man. He shows up on a motorcycle and he rides onto the estate. And I'm supposed to believe that Bruce Wayne adopted him?
Right, yeah.
That is not a child. That guy should get a job and move into his own place.
Well, no, he had a job. He had a job. They died. You know, it's just like, oh, I can't do circus performance anymore. What do I do now?
I don't know how they're going to make it work. I assume he's going to be like maybe 13-ish. The idea is, since he was raised in a clan of assassins, it's probably going to be a little bit more believable, because this isn't a case where Batman is like finding an orphan and recruiting him into his crusade, right? He gets saddled with a little assassin, right, as Gunn called him, and basically has to try to train him not to kill people, right? That's kind of the whole arc.
That sounds like an 80s sitcom.
What if Damien's like a
Assassin.
Petri kid?
Like a what?
What if Damien's like a Petri kid? You know what I mean? Like he's. I mean, they're gonna.
No,
Like,
okay.
like,
I think
Rock
they're
Rule.
going to stick with. Okay, actually, no. This gets to an interesting point. If they have Damian Wayne, that means a few things. Batman's going to be like 30s, right? He can't be that young, right?
Right.
We're going to have Ra's al Ghul They may or may not show up in this movie. Well, presumably Talia will have to, in some way.
Someone's gonna have to, yeah.
But they may not play a big role, but they're part of this world now. If Damian Wayne is an adult and they still have all these other Batman characters like Nightwing, then we're going to have potentially Nightwing because he'll be grown up by this point, right?
Right.
So Nightwing, Batgirl, maybe Batwoman, like all these characters, by the time Damian Wayne shows up, they've all been established, which means whether they show up in this movie or not, the Bat family, the so-called Bat family, exists.
Still there.
And that's kind of new. We haven't really seen any of that in any movies. Like the movies have always just rebooted back to Batman Year One. He's a loner, right? And they've never leaned into the wider, not since Batman like 66, right? The 60 TV show, have they tried to like build out the wider world of Batman. Right. Well, in the animated series, I guess they did. It's going to be very different.
Can we all agree that Robin can't be 9 years old? Like, he just can't be.
He's going to have to be like 13, right? At least.
Like teens, yeah, like teenagers. He can't be 9 walking around punching 300-pound men and knocking them out or drop kicking them. I mean, unless they're like, yo, give him enhanced powers to be equal to Batman. Then we're like, okay, maybe. But.
I mean, they did it in Kick-Ass. They can do it here. That's the
but
thing.
She wasn't 9, was she? Or
I mean, she was like 10-ish, 10, 13.
Okay.
But she wasn't like she was still a kid. The thing is,
I think
it's a lot easier for me to believe it if yes, he's a kid, but also he's fast and he's willing to use knives.
Exactly.
People.
I feel that
like, it's not like Batman where like he doesn't want to kill people, so he's got to get him in a headlock or something. He could just kill them. Like, that's how he would have been trained, right, as a child from an early age. So.
Yeah, I think that would be the dynamic that would be interesting because of the fact that because of his youth, we know from the day he was born, he's been instilled that you're going to be the heir apparent of Ra's al Ghul, and you've been sired by the greatest detective in the world.
The heir to the demon's head, I think, is like the title that
You're the epitome of a demigod on Earth kind of thing. Like he's been instilled in that like since he was walking, where he could comprehend language, right? And so for me, it's just like that ego's there, right? But like, I feel that his youth is an obstacle, and that would be interesting to see. Where it's just like, okay, how does a 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old person who has this mentality be able to defeat someone who's like 3-4 times stronger than him? It's not going to be like a fisticuff fight. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We're going to see cunning. We're going to see intrigue. That'd be interesting to see. And it was just like, and kind of disturbing because it's like, holy crap, this is a kid.
So in terms of tone, right, this is another interesting part is Grant Morrison in his run on Batman really tried to bring together literally everything Batman has ever been into like one cohesive continuity, right? From the goofy Silver Age stuff all the way up to like the hardcore 80s stuff, right? And I don't know that it's always successful, but it usually is, at least in my opinion. But it does create a character who's less of a brooding detective and more like a globe-trotting adventurer, right? More like James Bond. So there's that famous line, from Flashpoint, "You're the James Bond of superheroes." In Grant Morrison's run, he is like, there's a lot of these scenarios that are straight out of a James Bond movie. And I when I'm trying to imagine this on screen, what comes to my mind, you guys know, what's his name? The director. The director of
Steven Spielberg.
Thanks, Simon. Super helpful.
Yep, you're welcome.
Just thought of a director, Martin Campbell, who is famous for directing the truly awful Green Lantern movie, but also directed Casino Royale. And The Mask of Zorro. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
I enjoyed The Mask of Zorro.
Yeah, that was a good one.
And when I imagine what this movie could end up being, it's something like a mashup of Casino Royale and The Mask of Zorro, right? Like, I would love to see a movie that looks like Casino Royale, has that style of editing and screenwriting, but has Batman in it. That would be amazing. So I don't know what you guys are thinking in terms of tone, because like we've already got the Batman out here, where he's a brooding loner who's a detective in a city where it's always raining. What would you guys want from a movie like this if it's running concurrently with the Batman?
I think.
Good.
No, you go ahead, Josh. You go ahead.
I'm a father, and I think I would definitely want to see that. Not reconciling because like he didn't know he had one, but like that awkwardness of getting to know your son and trying to love him. You know what I mean? Like like I know I'm supposed to love you, but I'm Batman, and
But I'm Batman.
I can't love anything. That means I won't be Batman no more. And maybe we see like a struggle between like Batman trying to be a good father, but also be the best Batman, and Damien's here. And Damien, I don't think Damien's gonna be as great as we want him to be as far as the fighting skills or a threat, but he's just a menace. You know what I mean? And Batman has to watch this menace, um, you know, uh, who's been brainwashed and indoctrinated in this cult, and he has to try to bring him to reality of this world, like and speaking and talking, communicating. And so you throw someone like Deathstroke in there to mix this all up and kind of make things more difficult. That's I don't know if there's a specific tone, but that's kind of what I want to see. Like major threat,
Right.
and then just this identity crisis between Batman and his love for his son.
So in terms of like, yeah, globetrotting espionage and intrigue and stuff, yeah, there is like this world of assassins that Batman sometimes touches on that, again, we haven't seen much of in the movies, right, in live action. Yeah, Deathstroke is like the big one. It would be interesting to see, yeah, a movie where... Because like none of the Batman movies outside... I mean, there's that one scene in Batman v Superman where he fights like a bunch of guys. It's a pretty cool scene, right? The Batman, there's some pretty good action. Yeah, there's some pretty good action in that. But for the most part, Batman movies have not been great with action. Nolan is a terrible action director. And his action scenes in his movies were just a mess, right? I think in the first one, it's like all dark. You can't really see anything that's happening.
Can't see anything.
The shipping containers.
Yeah. And he punches some dogs in that scene.
Yeah.
That was in the second one, I think.
Is that? Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the second one. He chucks a dog out of a skyscraper. Yes, that's
Just
right.
throws
That's
him.
right. Yep.
And then in The Dark Knight Rises, there's that infamous scene where he's fighting a bunch of dudes with Catwoman, and there's a guy standing like in the background who's just going like, ugh, and then he falls over, right? Like,
Right.
nobody touches him. It would be cool to see. And this is another reason I like Casino Royale. That's a movie with, I think, really good action that is both entertaining but also pretty grounded and believable in terms of like. And I would love to see a Batman movie where it's kind of on that level, where he's not superhuman, right? But he is tough and he can hold his own against pretty much anybody, right? So yeah. Before we move on, just to touch on really quick, and we don't know anything about this, but the other side of this announcement is The Brave and the Bold, which, as I mentioned, is tonally kind of in line with what Grant Morrison is doing. It draws on some of the more colorful aspects of the character, but it sounds like part of the goal here would be to have Batman function as a way to introduce a lot of other characters, right? So we know we're going to have Jaime Reyes because they're making that Blue Beetle movie. In The Brave and the Bold, Batman and Ted Kord, the original Blue Beetle, are like BFFs, right? And they work together for years before Ted Kord dies, right, on one of their missions. And Batman ends up taking Jaime Reyes under his wing, right? After he finds the Scarab and he discovers Ted Kord's like secret base and all that stuff. So there's a lot in this show, and I don't know if they're specifically going to draw on any of it, but there is sort of this pattern, right, of like Batman almost as a supporting character. I mean, he's still kind of the main character of the show, but it's usually he's like you're watching the show through him, but really the show is about whoever he's teaming up with that week, right? And that would be interesting, right? Is to see some more of this where like they can build out the world. It's not just going to be we're going to have more Batman movies again, but we're going to have like the world of DCU and Batman is part of it, and he's helping you. He's sort of introducing you to it. And I really want to see this in live action.
Yeah. Yep.
Because uh, because I just want to see it. I just want to see what's his name, Plastic Man.
Yeah.
DC can be so much fun.
I feel that the movie, the Batman movie that Gunn is bringing into the DCU will be the foil for that, because we'll see is it's not another, it's basically the Batman father figure. He's a guide. He's a guide. He's no longer,
Right.
I mean, yes, he'll be the hero that we'll expect him to be with the espionage and all that, but also along that story is the story of him trying to raise his son. You know what I'm saying? As a teacher, as a guide, as a moral figure. We're gonna see. I think we're seeing that, and I think that is actually the plan, like you said, Jordan, to introduce all these other characters and then introduce more characters down the road. Like, so he'll be a teacher figure of the DCU. I think that's great. I think that'll be phenomenal, because you're right. All the Batman movies that we've seen, they're pretty much the same movie. You know, he's like a crime fighter, or he's just
Right.
like, he's just bashing people's skulls in and stuff. We never see him outside of that, and like we never see him like elevated in another way that we do see in the comics, right? And I think it would be an interesting. I'd be
Yeah.
excited to see that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, moving along. We got 2 more to go. Um, Almost there. So the next one. So this is what I'm most excited about personally. Um, I mean, even more than Batman, which is saying a lot. So Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. This was a comic series written by Tom King, illustrated by, I'm just going to say Bilquis Evely, or Evely Bilquis. I've seen it spelled both ways. She's an artist from Brazil, so I don't know how to
Nice.
pronounce this. This is an absolutely amazing comic book. I could sit here and try to describe it. It'd be a waste of time. Just go online, find some screenshots of it. Bilquis' art is very unique. It's reminiscent of a lot of other artists that I like, but there's just something. It reminds me a lot of like some of the like Franco-Belgian comics, European comic stuff that they used to have in heavy metal, where it's like this is just really detailed fantasy worlds. Incredible craftsmanship on display on every single page. And the coloring work is also excellent. I forget who did the coloring, but it's a gorgeous book. And Tom King's writing is good. Tom King is always kind of hit or miss for me. I like a lot of his stuff. A lot of his stuff is some of my favorite stuff, like this. He also last year, and I think it's still ongoing, a series with a Human Target, a super D-list DC character that I think was completely forgotten, but an awesome book as well, worth checking out. And Gunn said they're just going to straight up adapt this comic into movies. So it's not even an inspiration. Presumably, Tom King is on the writing team largely for that reason.
Nice.
And presumably they will also draw from Bilquis' art. I cannot wait to see this movie. This is maybe the most exciting thing to happen in comic book movies since there have been comic book movies. Because, like, I'll be honest, I feel like Marvel has kind of like waded out into the cosmic stuff a bit, but there is something kind of like, it's fun, but it's not. You go and watch, like Guardians of the Galaxy is fun. It's colorful. I like it a lot. Some of the other stuff, it's fun. It's in a pulpy way. Then you go and you watch something like Dune, and you're like, see, cosmic, space fantasy, right? A space epic can be so much more. And DC, their characters are so much bigger and more iconic. They can't just be kind of fun, right? When you got characters like Superman, Supergirl, Batman, they need to be iconic to work. And out of all the projects I've seen here, this is the one that, at least to me, has the best chance at success of really being, like, really reaching its potential in terms of, like, all these projects. So yeah, I am super excited for this. I cannot wait for this to come out. I don't know when it's supposed to come out. It's probably going to be a few years. It's the kind of movie though that I've wanted to see from DC for a long time. And yeah, I'm probably going to go and reread the comic this week, and I might reread it once a year for the rest of my life because it's that amazing just to look at sometimes. Have you guys read this?
Nope.
Well, great.
No.
I tell you what, though, I will make the effort. I'm gonna make the effort this week. I'm gonna go to my local comic shop. I will.
He's not going to go to local comic book shop. He doesn't believe in supporting local. He'll go
No.
on Amazon.
I wasn't
He'll go to a
before.
big store, big box company, and buy it for $10 cheaper.
I mean, Amazon makes it cheap, but no. I will make the effort this week. I will go to my local.
I can't wait
shop.
to ask you about this next week and have you explain why you weren't able to make the effort.
No.
I feel that. Story.
I feel that I'm on a streak. I told you guys I watched all of Poker Face. I'm up to date with Poker Face. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go to my local comic book store. Hopefully they'll have this. My fear is that it's probably sold out because of the
If they don't,
announcement,
then you'll
but
just give up right there and never read it.
I will. Yeah. I'm not gonna go to another comic book shop. No,
The funny thing about this, Josh, is that I own a copy of this comic book, and me and Simon both live in Los Angeles, and you could totally just borrow my copy, but he's not even going to bother asking.
No.
It's just,
So because you said that, I'll call you if I can't find a copy. I'm gonna read the first issue of this comic just because I don't know anything about it. You know,
Okay.
You're the artist. You're right. It's Bill Quist. I'm gonna butcher her name, but it looks amazing. I totally agree with you. You've inspired me, Jordan, to read it, so I'm gonna read it this week. So,
man, I wish.
Watch out.
Simon. Wish I could you.
As far as Supergirl for me, the only Supergirl I really know is the one from Batman and Superman, the comics, and also the movie, or the animated movie. And I know they retconned her whole background at that point. But yeah, that's really all I know, man. So I know you mentioned this a while ago. I think a couple episodes before we started doing it on this level, on this scale. But you mentioned this comic book, and you said it was fantastic. And I think that was in our.
It was number 2 on my top 10 comics of last year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Right after Catwoman.
Yeah. So to hear that he's adapting this from one of your favorite comic books means that he's watching us. Thank you, James Gunn.
Secret, he hacked into our Zoom, and
he somehow got a hold of these videos we never published anywhere.
Yeah,
it's like that's it. That's it.
Well, okay, that's actually, there is a serious point there though, which is like, again, we're not going back to the 80s.
Right.
They're looking at current stuff. Something the MCU, to their credit, has done. They have like occasionally included like newer characters, Miles Morales, right? People like that who are like, from the 2000s, newer storylines, where DC has been kind of stuck. Yeah, Civil War. It's nice to see them get newer stuff, and this was published last year, and so it's nice to see that James Gunn. He's not just a guy who read some comics back when he was in college or a teenager, and he's like, oh, I like this stuff.
Yeah, he's kept on reading them.
He still reads them. Yeah, he actually likes them now. So yeah. Nice. I'm super excited for this. I guess, there's not a whole lot to go on other than, it sounds like a cool story. Super interested to see who they cast for this, because this is another legacy character that presumably is going to be an ongoing presence in the DCU. But yeah, cool stuff.
Nice.
So we finally get to the very last item, which I think both me and Josh are not super excited about, but Simon is about to lose his shit apparently over here.
I'm just so happy. I am so happy that they're bringing Swamp Thing into the DCU.
Well, okay. Hold on though. It's not like it's not like they haven't made a Swamp Thing.
No, you're right.
They literally made a show like last year, and then there was.
Yes, right. Okay, that's true. But I guess the reason why I have a personal affinity towards Swamp Thing is because it was one of those obscure cartoon shows as a kid that they had, and I was like, this is so cool. I love this character. I think it's dope. the toy brand that they had was phenomenal. I think I still have my Swamp Thing action figure,
Oh,
and
I
like
remember
it's
those.
his arms stretched out, he had a string and stuff. It was such a dope toy, and then like all the villains were like these mutated hybrids. Anyways, and then on TNT, like it was a channel back in the day when we were growing up. They had an 80s movie, like a live action 80s Swamp Thing movie, and I thought that was freaking phenomenal. I thought that was the coolest movie in the world. So I have this personal attachment towards
Just to be
Swamp
clear,
Thing
I
in that
mean, you
regard.
thought it as a child, right? Because I don't know if it.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
As a child. Yeah, as a child.
I'm just saying, I've seen that. You know, I don't know if it's.
Oh no! It doesn't preserve well. No, definitely not. But it just vivid memories as a child. Anyways, I think it's cool, and I feel that it's gonna be. I hope it's gonna be connected with that whole occult aspect of it because um a lot of times he partners with Constantine as well, and that he and there was different iterations of him, right? And like I think one of the iterations, like because the original iteration was he was a scientist, uh, experiment gone bad, he becomes Swamp Thing, right? But then like Alan Moore, and I think you brought this up offline. You brought this up, Jordan, where like no, the idea was it's not him. He's actually the avatar of nature. Like he's like this. He's and I think that's a cool dynamic. And I feel that again, it goes into this supernatural realm of it all, and something that I think DCU does. I think something that DC never really ran away from, and something that they kind of embrace the weirdness of it. And again, when I see that, it gives me clues that they will venture towards that direction, and I am all about that.
So, I mean, okay. So there is one. Yeah. If there's anything I'm excited about, it's not. It's not so much this movie itself. I mean, it could be good. It's that it does set up for stuff like Constantine and other aspects of the mystical side of the DCU, and potentially in the long run, leading to something like Justice League Dark, right? And that could be cool. I think we said earlier, right? Like one of the interesting things about the slate is that it does feel like it's trying to, some like plant a seed for all these different parts. And Swamp Thing is the one that's planting that seed for like, mystical, supernatural stuff, right? He's an avatar of the green. In current continuity, Poison Ivy from Batman is connected to the green. That's where her powers come from, right? So there's potentially a lot there that could happen. And so we'll see what comes of that. But without any, because like he didn't mention this is, I almost put it on here because I'm certain he's going to look to Alan Moore's run for inspiration, but he didn't say that, and so like we just don't know what we're going to get yet from this version of Swamp Thing. So I am withholding my judgment on this until we learn more, and also who the director is going to be. Like we have no idea. I guess. Well, I mean, because the first name that pops in my head is a director that I'm not personally a huge fan of, but he's already working for DC and he does horror movies. Justin Lin. I'm talking about Justin Lin, guys. It's directed Aquaman.
Yeah. All right.
And he's done a bunch of horror movies, and so I feel like, but I don't know. I've just never really been. I thought Aquaman was pretty fun, but like I've never been a huge fan of his stuff. So I don't know who would direct this or what it would be like.
The Flash director could probably do this because he did it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And he supposedly did a great job with this Batman movie. So, I don't know. Is this Swamp? Is his name Swamp Thing?
Yeah. Swamp Thing.
This is Swamp Thing. Josh is trying so hard to care about this, and he's.
His name is Greg.
Yeah, I think he's just gonna be he's not gonna play a big part in the future. I think he's gonna play a big part just setting it up. He's a setup character. He's just so dark and mysterious. Like him and the Justice League, they don't work together well. He's just too big, too brooding. He's too much of a ego freak, you know.
Well,
I
so
can see him
okay.
like cameoing,
Yeah, he doesn't.
but
He doesn't factor into like the big Justice League stuff. He does show up in Tom King's Batman a few times. So clearly, Tom King has some love for this character. But yeah, I mean, he does like Simon said. He associates a lot with like John Constantine and other characters like that, and Madame Xanadu.
you know who I would have switched out with him, or I would have like made an argument for, um, instead of him, which would have been a way better character, is that demon character where he's like he goes from being a human to a demon, and like this demon's super powerful. He was a lot. He came out a lot in the later seasons of Justice League Unlimited.
He speaks in
He's
rhyme.
a fire. He has a fire sword.
Yeah, he speaks in rhymes, right? When he's a demon. Etrigan.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Etrigan the demon, and he is bound to Jason Blood. That's the guy. Yeah. Well,
Yes.
here's the thing: Jason Blood and Swamp Thing team up a lot too. Again, they've both been associated with Justice League Dark at different times. So potentially,
See,
this could lead into Jason Blood.
Swamp Thing reminds me of Bane from Batman 2. That's like his character. He's just some. Simon, you're muted.
Thank you. That's not the fault of the character. That's the fault of the interpretation of the character from that movie, right? Like Bane was just totally botched in that movie, you know.
Right.
So
But in the comic books, even in the comic books, he seems like that kind of character.
well,
Have you read Alan Moore's Swamp Thing run?
No.
no, no.
Yeah. So it's been a while. It depends a lot on who's writing him because you're right. He's very thematically heavy, and as a character, because he's not human, physically he spends all his time motionless in a swamp. Like he doesn't actually do anything. The only time he takes human form is when a human wants to talk to him. So yeah, it's difficult. See, that's a good point. It's difficult to write. Like in comics, you can kind of get away with it. You can be impressionistic
Right.
with the art. I don't know how this works in a movie, because he's just vines, right? In mud.
So
Um,
it's they confirmed it as a movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Because I think it would work well as a show, like an anthology show of just like different characters. Because you're right, I concede to that. I do. I
I
think
mean,
in many ways,
apparently it
Swamp.
didn't work well as a show because they canceled the show that before it even aired.
But I feel that
It was
I
an
feel
HBO
that
Max show too, wasn't it?
No, it was on. I think it was on a different network.
Was it on WB?
Yeah, let me see.
I feel like it was a streaming service.
It was. I think it is on HBO Max. I don't know if it was originally. So it was 2019. It was made for DC Universe. Remember DC?
Oh, yeah.
They
So it
had
was
a
a
separate
streaming
DC. Yeah, and then it was one of the shows that got canceled when they shut it down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was like 5 episodes in, and I was like done.
yeah.
Mm.
They just.
I watched the
scrapped it.
first one, and I was like, yeah, this is whack, dude.
Is it? I had never
It-
seen this.
it has some real Beauty and the Beast vibes going on.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, the girl was like in love with this like swamp monster.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well,
Well,
I feel that maybe just dealing. I think it would be good as an anthology show because it would be characters who might represent particular things dealing with nature.
honestly, the
dealing-
more I
dealing
think
with
about it,
rain.
the more I just want them to make a John Constantine show. I'd like to see that. I would
Maybe
like to
that's-
see a Constantine procedural, where he's just doing cases, involving
Yeah,
demons
that'd
and
be dope.
ghosts, and yeah.
Maybe that's ultimately what I really want.
Yeah,
And
'cause, like,
I'm seeing.
he'd be a great John Constantine sidekick. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like in Werewolf by Night, right? With Man Thing
Right.
and
Exactly.
yeah. So
Right. So okay. So
All right.
imagine if they tried to make a Man Thing movie first. Actually, no, they did. They did make a Man Thing movie, and it was terrible.
That
Have
was
you guys
before
seen?
Marvel Studios, though.
It
Before
was,
Marvel
yeah.
Studios.
It was made in Australia and it was really bad.
Okay.
But okay, so I think we've talked enough about Swamp Thing. Until we hear more, I don't know that I have any
Yeah, we'll
feelings
see.
about it.
But
So that
we got
is
to give him the benefit of the doubt and think it's going to be good because it's James Gunn.
I
And
mean,
so far, his track record has been superb
Jimmy G.
that's a good point.
with Heroes.
No, Simon. That's that's a good point though. He hasn't really made a bad movie,
Right,
or anything bad.
right.
Um,
Even
so
his
you're right.
special, his Christmas special, which I thought was going to be horrible. I thought it was going to be dumb.
Nope.
Turned out really good.
Yeah, no, it
It
was
was very
phenomenal.
heartwarming and fun and endearing.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, it'd be probably pretty dumb to bet against him. I think the question is, can he delegate? That's the thing, right? It's one thing to be, oh, he's an artist and he can make his own stuff, but he's going to have to. Some of this he'll do himself, but some of this he's going to have to hand off to people and make it all work, right? He's going to have to do the Kevin Feige job, right, to a degree, and that's not proven here, right? And he did say he wants the different artists to have vision, and he wants them all to be unique. How do they do that while keeping everything consistent? It's going to be a challenge, right, to pull that off. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I will say this: I almost don't care that much if some of these don't work, because I would rather watch an interesting failure than a safe success, right? Like Marvel has basically created this formula for they churn out stuff that's pretty good, and you know it's going to be at least pretty good, right? You know what you're in for. With every single one of these, I have no idea what each of these is going to be like, right?
right.
And so even if some of them are bad, I'm kind of okay with it. I'd love to see how they botch a Swamp Thing movie if it turns out to be bad. That would be interesting to see. So
I mean, look, James Gunn made Groot a character that we love, so maybe he
Right.
can make Swamp Thing really good.
He can make you care about a plant. He's
Right.
proven it.
Essence the same thing, yeah, and Raccoon.
Talking. So yeah, any closing thoughts on the big picture here? And
All right, Simon, I'll give you more credit. Maybe it's because Shark was it Sharkman or
oh, King Shark.
Yeah.
King Shark was a great character too.
Yeah,
In
that's
Suicide
right.
Squad.
And he says
So
He's
he says,
literally
10
Groot.
words.
Yeah, he's literally Groot. So
who knows? Maybe Swamp Thing? Is it Swamp
yeah,
Thing?
Swamp Thing.
Okay, maybe Swamp Thing.
Greg the Swamp Thing.
Josh, you've heard of
I
Swamp
know
Thing
it is.
before, right?
I know.
Like,
I'm
you
totally
must-
messing with it.
So yeah, closing thoughts on the vision for the DCU and what we think, how we think this will go, and what James Gunn has presented.
Overall, I think just based off James Gunn making movies, I think it's gonna be fantastic. How he's able to, juggle being the head and then giving direction, and because let's face it, Kevin Feige is not afraid to say this is not my vision and cut off, these top tier directors, even actors, and turn them away. Like, nah. Like, what Rock did would never happen in Marvel.
Well, but would it happen now with DC? Because James Gunn, I mean, he did turn some actors
Right.
away
No.
right from the start. Yeah.
So can he do that? I don't know. We'll see.
As long as they continue to make good stuff, he will have the clout to do it, and I suspect
Yeah.
he has the spine to do it. Because James Gunn is people love this guy right now. I think we were talking the other day, because there's these directors like James Gunn, I think Ryan Johnson, another one, where people who work with him seem to really like working with him, and actors seem
Right.
to really want to be in their stuff, right? It's interesting to have somebody like that in charge of a studio like this, because usually those people are they're auteur directors. They go and they make their own stuff, right? So the Ryan Johnsons and the Denis Villeneuves, right? They have their people that they work with. They write, direct, and produce their stuff, and they go and do their thing. You don't usually see somebody like that running a major studio, right? That's, I don't know, it's an unknown quantity, but it does mean that they can attract a lot of good talent, right?
Yep.
And Gunn seems to inspire not just like, he inspires loyalty in people. We were talking about, what's his name?
Batista.
Dave
Batista, like, says he was going to quit. And like in some of his tweets, I'm like, this dude sounds like he's ready to fight somebody because they fired James Gunn. So
He was gonna quit. He quit Marvel. Remember, he said that I'm not gonna do Marvel anymore since they got rid of my friend James Gunn. And then I don't know what James Gunn did, but he said I'm sorry or whatever, and brought him back. And Batista's like, okay, I'm back, but this is it. I'm done.
he's just gonna go off and make art movies now, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited. This is gonna sound weird. It's not so much the artistic stuff, the aesthetic choices and the creative choices that are most interesting to me, because in a lot of ways, he's just letting people who know how to write and draw stuff good make stuff, right? Like that's, it's the business angle where you do have this creative director, and then you've got the business. What's his name? Saffron.
Saffron. Yeah.
Yeah, who's running the business side of things. That's interesting to me because Ryan Johnson, I forget his name. He's got this guy that he went to college with, who's his producer on all of his projects. And in interviews, he's talked about how he just lets that guy handle all the business side of stuff. He doesn't handle any of that, right? And he just focuses on writing the scripts, directing the movies, right? Just doing his job. It was that guy who had the idea to set up an auction for the sequels to Knives Out. And that's where Netflix bid, like, what was it, like $760 million to get the exclusive rights to those movies. So, like, they made out like on that deal.
Right.
So that's interesting, is to have, instead of just have one person that the entire studio depends on, a Kevin Feige, right? You have this team, and let them focus on what they do best. And I think potentially that's why James Gunn has time to respond to everybody on Twitter. So like from a business angle, they've differentiated themselves, I think, already from Marvel in terms of like the content strategy here and the way that they're positioning their brand, right? The DC brand compared to Marvel. And potentially, if these shows, this is what I'm really interested in. It's not the cinematic releases. Those will make a ton of money, I'm sure. It's the streaming stuff that's really important. I think that's why James Gunn got this job, because he was successful on HBO Max with the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, right? And if they can sell people on signing up for HBO Max for these prestige shows, then they can have a successful streaming channel where Disney is struggling, right? Because Disney's had some good shows, but people still apparently aren't signing up for Disney Plus as much as they would like.
It's because there's so much. I want to get into this, but it's not the show. But yeah, there's
Right. We can have a whole other show about the streaming wars and what might happen. But that could be, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to imagine, but we're in a place right now where Disney is struggling on the streaming side and could potentially lose big to Warner Media, right? Is struggling with the parks and could potentially lose big to Universal. And I think Bob Iger has his work cut out for him. And I'm excited to see, I really hope these shows do well, because I want to see more stuff like this. And I think HBO Max has, for the most part, turned out a lot of good stuff. A lot of the changes recently had me worried. The merger with Discovery had me worried. But if this is the direction they're going, it's potentially really interesting. And we could get a lot of stuff that's as good as Peacemaker. So yeah, those are my closing thoughts. Simon, do you have anything you want to add before we let Josh go to bed?
I think both of you said it right. I think what it is there's a sense of, it reminds me of how Marvel started, and I think back then when Iron Man first premiered and came out, like, and then they had talk about the DCEU, like, I was so excited just to see this back and forth between these two giants in popular culture, right? And we didn't really, the DCU didn't really pan out that way. You know, I was like, oh, that sucks. But at least we have Marvel, right? That was the idea. But then now it's just like, oh, okay, you know, they are playing it safe. They are, and they're big, they're huge, and I get it. But as a consumer, it's like, man, like I want to be loyal, but there's gonna be a point where it's like maybe there's just gonna be something that I choose not to watch in movies. You know,
It's
I
so
feel
nice that you want to be loyal. Like, you don't want to hurt Disney's feelings.
I don't. I don't. I know.
You're
There's many reasons for it, but I don't. But like, yeah, no, it's just like, oh, okay. But then, because I would like to still see these things in live action, right? But now we see DC doing something. This excites me again. I feel like what I felt like when the MCU started out. And I was like, I can't wait to see what's happening. And I think James Gunn. I'm very confident in his work and his skill set, and he made me love Guardians of the Galaxy. So I was just like, okay, like, yeah, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens, and I'm all for the ride. So that's it.
All right. And we are done.
All right, guys. This was a very extensive, in-depth episode today. Thank you, Jordan, for guiding us through this crazy web of James Gunn's vision. Simon, half your opinions made no sense today. And so
I'm clinging on to having Booster Gold played by Logan Paul. That I feel that is my key contribution to this
that
podcast.
upset me so much right now, Simon.
Bold creative choice.
Yes.
Choice.
I was hoping you're like, I hope they play off like a Logan Paul type character, you know, not get Logan Paul to play.
Okay, that's probably more realistic.
Right.
But it'd be a lot less funny. It'd be so much better to have just Logan Paul as just in the movie, and I imagine he's probably really bad at acting. And
Right.
Or what if it's like a documentary style?
Yeah. Oh my
And-
oh my
gosh.
god.
Like this is
They
Spinal
per-
Tap.
They
Well,
pretend
because
to
it can be
tell him-
filmed. His robot can be the
Right.
camera.
Yeah.
Follow him around. Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's a reality show.
Yeah.
It's a
Yep.
superhero reality
Yeah.
show.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good.
That would be pretty. Oh man, now I'm thinking about this. That would be pretty great. I would love to. Yeah, be a reality show like Cops. And you know what it would be? It would be Reno 911, but with superheroes. And
Yes.
oh my
That'd be
god,
so good.
Oh, I would love that.
The life of an influencer.
Yep.
But yeah, so I thought today's show was really good, guys. Thank you for showing up. Thank you guys for watching. You guys don't have to go home. But you gotta get the hell out of here. We gotta close up shop today. So with that, farewell. Bye.
I was waiting for you to say something. All right, get the fuck out of here, people.
Thank you. That's what I was waiting for. Thank you.
All right.